we are going to walk through how to fill out page 1 of the California RPA. And you may have noticed in the last video as well, I'm looking at it through an editor. And this is the editor that through CAR that we get in order to be able to fill out each of the forms or fields rather that can be filled out in this document. So the first thing we need to do is put the date that this document was prepared. Obviously, I will put today's date because usually the date prepared will be the day that I'm drafting the contract. Now, very often in other parts of the contract, when we're creating addendums and things of that nature, we will reference back to the date of this contract. In my opinion, this date, when we're talking about the date of the contract, can be either the date that it was prepared or the date in which we got the last signature. So when the seller accepts this contract, they will sign it and date it, and that could be a different date of the date being prepared. So, I prepare this offer today and I send it out to my client today, and then we send it back to the seller to present the offer tonight, and then they look over the offer tomorrow, and then the seller agrees the next day. So it's going to be a different date down here. That can also be a reference date as to when this contract was dated, right? Because the agreement was actually dated as of the date that the seller agreed to it. Or we can say that the agreement was dated the date that it was prepared. So one of those two dates would be applicable if you're referring back to this contract. Now we get into the offer section of this contract. What is this offer for? Well, this is an offer from, and we put in the buyer's name. And so we write Mr. Buyer. Okay. Now, if there is a second buyer, let's say it's Mrs. Buyer, we can write that in as well. And you would basically separate it by a comma. Mr. Buyer and comma Mrs. Buyer. That is an offer from these two people. Now, keep in mind, I'm doing this for simplicity's sake, but really you would write in the full name, John Smith. And this is going to be Joan Smith, okay? That's how you would write in the names. We'll keep it a little bit more accurate. 1B asks the property to be acquired is, we'll leave it as 123 Main Street, situated in the name of the city. We'll call it, the name of the city is somewhere. Here I'm in Los Angeles County, California, and the zip code will be 12345. The assessor parcel number, so every property is going to have its own assessor parcel number. Usually it looks like 123-34-5678. So it's usually three, at least in California or Los Angeles, I should say, it's 3 numbers followed by a dash with 2 numbers followed by a dash with 4 numbers. It represents the lot in the assessor's book of all the lots in that particular county. And so all of this information, 123 Main Street in somewhere Los Angeles, California, 12345 zip code, with this assessor parcel number, is going to be referred to from now on in this document as the property. That's what section 1B refers to. Section 1C says the terms of this purchase are specified below and on the following pages. 1D says buyer and seller are referred to herein as the parties. So if we talk about the buyer and seller together, we are talking about the parties, but if we are talking about John Smith and Joan Smith, they are collectively by themselves just the buyer. Okay. Now we get into agency, and we talked about the agency disclosure and we discussed how that really works with one party representing others, or if you have dual agency. So this is where we fill that part out. And it says that the parties already acknowledged that disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship. And again, for reference, that was the first 2 pages here that we discussed in one of the prior videos. And so now it is saying it's already been understood about the agency relationship. So now we're going to confirm what that agency relationship looks like. So we have the seller's brokerage firm, and the firm name can be Seller Brokerage LLC. And their license number will be 1234567 or 578. Let's put it that way. And the broker is representing the seller in this case. Now, it is possible that the seller brokerage can represent both the buyer and the seller. So you can check that box. But now we ask for the seller's agent's information. So the seller's agent's information can be John Broker. And John Broker, however, might just be representing the seller. So it doesn't allow us, stupidly, in this system, to select the seller's agent. Because it is possible, and I'll get to this in a minute, that the seller's brokerage can be the brokerage representing both the buyer and the seller. However, the agent can be a different agent for the for the buyer and the seller. In other words, if I am representing the seller, I, as the agent, have to hang my license at a brokerage. We'll call that brokerage Seller Brokerage. But my colleague, who also hangs their license at Seller Brokerage, whose name can be Eileen can be representing the buyer by herself. Now, John, the broker, me, is representing the seller. So I am only the seller's agent, and Eileen is only the buyer's agent. But since the brokerage is representing both, it really should have this box checked. Most of the time, and I'm sorry if it was confusing, but most of the time it should just be that the individual agents are representing each individual party. So one agent represents the seller, one agent represents the buyer. And that is the most typical format that you will see, so we'll use that approach. Now, the seller's agent is going to be John Broker, and he's going to have his own license number. It can be 436 whatever. Okay, that's going to be his license number. And again, all of this is fictitious. I'm just showing you how to write it out. But you would get the appropriate license number. Now, if there is no brokerage representing anybody, you would leave it blank. Okay, if you are representing yourself, you can leave the buyer's brokerage firm and the buyer's agent blank. Okay, so we'll do that just in case that you are representing yourself in this situation. You would just need to get the seller's, sorry for zooming in. You would need to get the seller's agent's information and the seller's agent's brokerage information in order to fill out that top section. It will ask you if the buyer's agent that's referring to the buyer's agent, whether it's the buyer's agent or it's representing as a dual agent both the buyer and the seller. It's going to ask you if there is more than one brokerage that represents the seller or the buyer. In some cases, you will have a situation where the seller is represented by two agents that are working together. They're colleagues, they know each other, and they come from two different brokerages, not necessarily under one brokerage. It is possible that two agents from two different brokerages like each other, work well together, and they want to do business together, but they hang their licenses at different brokerages. It is also possible that, let's say, the seller is going through a divorce and the one spouse is going to be represented by one agent and the other spouse is represented by another agent, and both of those agents hang their licenses at two different brokerages. So if that was the case, whether it's for the buyer or the seller, then you would check this box and the appropriate related box, whether it's for the buyer or the seller. This box is typically always checked, and that is because we also include that other form, the PRBS form that we went through, which is all the way at the end of this document. Okay, and now we move through to section 3, and we get to start filling out some of the terms. And what we're going to go through is the rest of the terms on the first page, because these are the terms that are really going to discuss what the actual offer is. And the first thing that we are asked for is the purchase price. Now, we are going to put in, it's again a fictitious file, but we are going to type out 500,000. Now, within this editor, it doesn't allow me to put commas in, but when I put in the number, it automatically puts in a comma and a cents period there. So if you are manually writing in what the offer is going to be, you should write it in this format. Now, if it was an all cash offer, I would check this box and the offer would be filled out a little bit differently. But for our purposes, we are going to fill it out as if it was a offer that is going to be using a loan. Now, 3B is asking what the close of escrow is going to be. Typically, I will put in a number of days in which it will take us to close this offer. The day count on the offer is going to actually be up to you and your lender as to how quickly you think you are going to be able to close the deal. Now, some lenders work faster than others, and this is a discussion for another time, but you should ask your lender how quickly they can close. There are some lenders that are going to take 30 days. Some might take longer, like 45. And there are some that might be able to do it in less time, like 25 days or 21 days or even 15 days. A cash offer might even be able to close in, let's say, 7 days, because they don't have to do as much work as the lender will have to do for a loan. So the less time that you are offering for this contract period is typically seen as a stronger offer. So the less days is stronger, the more days is weaker. That's typically how it is going to be seen by the seller. Although a seller might need some time. So if you have to rush it because you need to get out of your rental really quick and you need to do it in 15 days, that may be a strong offer typically. But if the seller needs 30 days in order to get out of the house and you're trying to rush them, well, that may be a situation where it's seen as a weaker offer if you're not flexible to work with the seller on that day count. So keep that in mind, and that's one of the questions you'll want to ask the listing agent or the seller, what they are really looking for as far as the terms go in this offer. Now, alternatively, you can not write the number of days and you can put it for a specific date, let's say 30 days from now. But the problem is as we discussed before, if I send this offer to the seller today, they may not get back to me for 2 days with an acceptance, in which case, if the seller does need 30 days to complete it and to get the file completed, now they're only going to have 28 days from the date of acceptance. So to make it a little bit more fluid, I usually recommend checking this box and going with a total day count so that you have that flexibility to start the day count as of the date after acceptance. Because as you can see here, this is 30 days after acceptance, not 30 days from the date that it's sent. Okay. And also keep in mind that these are calendar days, they're not business days. So 30 calendar days after acceptance. Now, the expiration of the offer is 3C, and it refers to paragraph 33A down below. So if you need more information about what it's referring to about the expiration of the offer, you can scroll all the way down to 33A and read about the expiration. But the expiration of the offer is going to be filled in here. And always, if it is left blank, it'll be 3 calendar days after all buyer signatures. So whenever we refer to day count, it is going to be calendar days unless otherwise specified. Here, they actually additionally specify it that it is calendar days as well, but it is specifying that it's calendar days after the buyer's signatures are dated down below at the last page of the offer. Or we can change it. This offer might expire. Maybe we want it to expire tomorrow, November 14th. And we can put in November 14th, and we can write, instead of 5 p.m., we can write 6 p.m. on November 14th. That's maybe if we want to entice the seller to respond to our offer faster, because we don't want them to try to shop our offer around, or we need to know an answer because otherwise we're going to accept another offer that was given. There are various reasons as to why we might want to have a shorter expiration date. We may also want to have a longer expiration date. It is entirely up to you. But depending on the way that the market is, we might find that the seller, it might be a seller's market. And in that case, we might not be able to get them to speed it up. They may respond whenever they feel like it. But if it's a buyer's market, we might have a little bit more of a push and a hold over the seller to respond faster. The initial deposit amount, this is going to be your earnest money deposit, your good faith deposit. And in LA, it is 3% of the purchase price. So in this case, it's going to be $15,000. And it is going to be due within 3, or if otherwise specified, you could put in another digit here, 3 business days after acceptance, because we can't transmit money through a wire transfer on any days other than business days. Therefore, the amount that is due by wire to escrow is going to be due within 3 business days after acceptance and is going to be sent by wire transfer. Okay? Now, the purpose of having this money in is to signify to the seller that you are serious about this offer. And in doing so, you are sending this money to escrow. I believe we've talked about that before, but again, escrow is an intermediary, a party that is going to oversee the contract and going to oversee the transaction. And they're going to hold on to the money. And they are going to release that money only when the transaction is closed, or it is canceled. And the purpose of having this money in there is to make sure that the buyer doesn't just walk away. Because once we are in contract, the buyer is very much in control of this contract. The seller is not able to get out of this contract at all unless they have their own contingencies, which is very rare and usually only exists if they are also looking to buy a new home and they have a contingency to buy a new home first before they can sell this home. So this money, this deposit, holds the buyer accountable for making sure that they proceed with this contract. If the buyer is going to walk away or cancel this contract, they are going to lose this deposit. That's the way it works. It holds the buyer accountable since the seller has no choice but to continue down this path of selling the home. We want to hold the buyer just as responsible and liable for buying this home as well. But as we will see on the following pages, the buyer does have contingencies in which they can cancel the contract and still get that money back. But before we get to that, let's just understand that that's what this initial deposit is for. It is to hold the buyer accountable and tell the seller that we're serious. Now, in other states or in other counties, you may be able to put down less than 3%. Here in LA, 3% is seen to be a strong offer. Less than 3% is seen to be a weaker offer. You can put down more, but it is not advisable. I always recommend only putting down as much as 3% unless you really know what you're doing, or unless it's a deal in probate in which it is usually required to be a 10% down payment, or a 10% deposit. Now, if you really want to make your offer much stronger, and this is usually what investors will do, is they will mark off that they are going to give an increased deposit where they can give another $20,000 after they remove any or all of their contingencies. Because after they remove their contingencies, they know they want to buy the place. So it's a way of saying, hey, if after I remove my contingencies, I still cancel the money, I still cancel the contract, you can keep not only the $15,000, but also this additional $20,000. And it just makes it for a stronger offer in the seller's eyes. But typically for your situations, you are probably not going to do an increased deposit, nor are you going to have a need to do it. You're not going to be seen as a weaker offer by not having an increased deposit. Then again, if somebody you're competing against does have it, it will be viewed as a weaker offer because yours doesn't. But most of the time, most offers are not going to have an increased deposit. And if you did have this, again, you would fill out when this increased deposit would be sent into escrow, either on a date or something else, or upon the removal of all contingencies. Okay? So now we're going to get into the loan. And the loan is going to be, let's say, 80% of the purchase price. So 20% of the purchase price is $100,000. So in this case, 80% is going to be $400,000. And again, you can write in the 80%, but keep in mind the percentage number above is used for calculation purposes and is not a contractual term. So if you don't write it in, it doesn't really matter. I usually ignore this part, whether it's a fixed rate or an adjustable rate, and what the rate is supposed to be, and how many points the buyer's going to pay, and so on and so forth. The reason I don't put it in is because usually the rate is not locked at this point when we're writing the offer. We usually don't lock the rate until the contract is accepted. And so I don't want that to be a point of contention if we can't get that rate later. We want to move forward with the house, and we'll try to work that out. And if we can't get the rate we want, we have our loan contingency to cancel the contract. So I don't want to make it a point that we're going to cancel the contract or the contract is going to be invalid if we don't get the appropriate rate. So usually I will leave this blank, but if you wanted to, you can fill in this information. You also want to check the box of the type of loan. If you're using an FHA loan, a VA loan, if you're doing seller financing, which is a different type of discussion altogether as well, about the seller being the bank, or another type of a loan where it's like a bank statement loan or another type of non-qualified mortgage loan. Otherwise, typically you are going to have a conventional loan and nothing needs to be checked. Now, if it's an FHA or VA loan, then the delivery, you have to deliver the list of lender required repairs within a certain time period. And so standard will be 17 days unless another day is written in here. In other words, we need to get a list of lender required repairs that is usually done by the appraiser. And so usually this number will correspond with the appraisal contingency, which is on the next page, which we will get to shortly. After this loan is filled out, if you have a secondary loan, maybe you need an additional loan to help you with your down payment, for example, you can fill this out as well. If the down payment is going to be covered by a secondary loan and you're getting $100,000, then you would fill that out here. It may be seller financing. It may be a conventional. If it's not checked, it would be conventional again, or it could be seller financing, or it could be another type of loan. Maybe it's a down payment assistance type of loan that you would want to write that in there. But again, most of the time, this will also be blank. If you are filling this in, again, I might advise you to leave this part blank just in case it has to change. But if you want to write it in and make it a term of the contract, you can do that. You will also see here in E3, these are all section E, the loan amount. E3 is that pertains to the occupancy type. If this is your primary residence, you won't check any box. But if it's going to be a secondary home, like a vacation home, you would check this box. Or if it's an investment property, you would check this box. Okay? And what type of occupancy it is very much so pertains to the type of loan that you are getting. And that's why it's part of the E's, because the E's are pertaining to the loan. So A was the purchase price, B was the close of escrow, C was the expiration date, D refers to the deposits, right? The initial deposit and the increased deposit, D1 and D2. And now E1, 2, and 3 are the loan. And now once all that's filled out, this will automatically balance it. But if you are filling it out yourself, you will have to do the math on your own. So we are purchasing it for $500,000. We have already put down a deposit for $15,000, and we're getting a loan for $400,000. That leaves the balance of my down payment to be $85,000. Why? Because I'm putting down 20%, but I already put down 3% as my initial deposit. And again, this is called an earnest money deposit sometimes. Other times it's called a good faith deposit. But either which way, my deposit is $15,000 or 3% of the purchase price. And that is coming out of the 20% that I have to put down as my down payment. So now I have to pay at the end of escrow, towards the end of escrow, my cash due for my down payment is going to be the other 17% or $85,000 for a total of $500,000. 15,000 plus 400,000 plus 85,000 equals 500,000, which is our purchase price. And once you are done filling out the entire contract, you are going to initial down here at the bottom of this page, and pretty much every page is going to have initials. So I know this is one of the longer videos that we have created for this module, or for the entire course, should I say. But like I said, we want to go into a lot of detail. So this was page 1. And in the next video, since we're going to break it up a little bit, we will go into how to fill out the page 2 terms of this contract.